It is Saturday, April 12th, and thank you for joining us for another edition of the show. It's been some kind of week, hasn't it? It seems like a week is now becoming 6 or 7 months. I ask a question of you and my guests today, Carrie Sheffield and Bruce Fein. We welcome back Carrie. Is whether Donald Trump playing with a fire that is bigger and stronger than he or his team anticipated. I gotta tell you, the sell-off in the bond market is exactly what the Treasury Secretary didn't want to happen. No, I gotta tell you, whether you realize this or not, and maybe it's calmed down for now, but this week it seems as though the world was revolting on our U.S. debt at a time when we are trying to refinance, what is it, $6 trillion in debt. And this week's bond auction was an unmitigated disaster. Well, the president blinked. And why did he blink? He blinked just before a potentially failed Treasury auction. Wasn't because of Congress. Wasn't because of his billionaire friends in the business marketplace. He blinked because of the disaster that was about to happen on the markets. And man, oh man, he is playing with a high wire act with our economy and our lives, according to others. Hopefully, now that the market is surging a little more now, up and down like a roller coaster, preferably he gets some sound policies in place so we can get back to investing in America and not pontificating about it. It might seem strange that Congress, Bruce and Carrie, would willingly surrender its constitutional predominance to our president, be it Donald Trump or anybody else. After all, political theory presumes that institutions will fiercely defend their own powers and prerogatives, but that presumption has given way to partisan politics, to loyalty to the chief. And so Republicans in Congress are bowing down to Trump. Seems that way, right? I must tell you though, if this continues, Congress will not be the first branch of the federal government. It will be the ornamental branch, just a bauble with a pretty building on Capitol Hill. So Bruce Fein and Carrie Sheffield, who will stand up for our Constitution? Who will stand up for the American people? And on those answers to those questions, Carrie and Bruce, rests the fate of our republic. Bruce Fein?
Well, at least at present, the branch standing up most is the judicial branch. It is undertaken its customary approach to statutory constitutional interpretation. Trump has won some. He's not won all of them by any means. He's prevailed, at least in some temporary way, in the U.S. Supreme Court. But process is everything. And it's fair to say, at least so far, process in the judicial branch is working, unlike in the legislative branch. They entertain arguments. You appeal cases that you think that you should have won, but there's been no non-compliance with court orders yet. But I would acknowledge that the Constitution, in some respects, hangs by a thread, because there's only so much that the courts can do. There are what I call speed bumps in the road to constitutional elimination. And the primary branch that was expected to control excesses was the legislative branch, envisioned by James Madison and the framers of the Constitution. It simply isn't working anymore. We have these staggering amounts of sums at issue in the tariffs. Congress is nowhere to be seen. They basically gave the tariff power away in the International Emergency Economic Powers Act. You have these $7 trillion budgets. It all goes through with a continuing resolution. There are no hearings. We spend 20 years spending over $2 trillion in Afghanistan. There are no hearings. If Congress doesn't stand up to the plate and have a balancing act against the executive branch, I think the Constitution is in deep peril.
You know, Carrie, unstated in all this is what the Democrats will do or should do. They certainly have their place in our constitutional system, even if I'm still not a fan of what they seem to want to do, which I think sometimes is pretty scary. That's why I think the states are still so important. Westmore might be fine for the governor of Maryland, but not for Texas. And the same would hold true in reverse for Governor Greg Abbott of Texas. He shouldn't be governor of Maryland. So where are we to go, Carrie?
Well, that is one thing that I do love about America is our federalist system where so many, I think, exciting things are happening in the states where you have governors who are leading, whether it be on taxes, lowering taxes, in some cases even having no income tax, like in Florida and other states. And what we're seeing is a migration of many people away from liberal states like California and Illinois into conservative states like Texas and Florida. And so it's a natural experiment of far left Marxist policies being implemented in the states where people are leaving. And they're going to places where they have school choice, where they have lower regulation, where they have more freedom. And the fact that we're having more congressional seats flowing to the red states tells people all that we need to know about ideas that actually work. And so that would be my advice to federally to the Democrats in Congress. Unfortunately, you've got the leading voices right now are so far left. I wouldn't call them necessarily loyal opposition. They seem pretty disloyal to our founding principles. People like Bernie Sanders, AOC, Jasmine Crockett, incredibly divisive people, and they're doing the opposite of the wisdom of Bill Clinton. I'm not endorsing his personal behavior, but politically, Bill Clinton knew what he needed to do to bring his party more to the center, and moderated the Democratic Party on issues like welfare reform, fiscal reform, actually balancing the budget, even on social issues. He said the phrase that abortion should be safe, legal, and rare. I can't imagine a Democrat saying that today. They'd probably be just ran out of the party because instead you have abortion trucks, claiming they can do abortions at the DNC. And so I think the Democrats are going to remain in the wilderness until they realize that's not where the American people are, the average median voter.
Bruce Fein, how serious was this week's failed Treasury bond auction? And what does it signal about global confidence in U.S. debt?
Well, it's very important. I'd like to make one observation. I agree what's said about federalism, but it's diminished in its importance because so much power, especially the money, has gravitated to the federal government. And over the years, because of the income tax and the revenues, the federal government can get the states to do what they want just by offering money. That's why they all sign up for Medicaid and everything else. So the federalism issue is much weakened because of the federal income tax, which is the reason why we need to diminish the size of the federal government. With regard to the bond market, it's very important, Armstrong. This last budgetary year was the first time where the carrying cost, the interest on the national debt exceeded the Pentagon budget. Over $1 trillion. We have $37 trillion national debt. If we can't turn over that debt, we go bankrupt. And unfortunately, a substantial portion of that debt is owned by the Chinese. We are obviously at loggerheads with the Chinese. They don't buy. Then how do we finance the day-to-day operations of the government? It's hugely important. And if the confidence of the United States is diminished and no one's going to buy our debt, we are in serious trouble. We're going to look at 1932, 33, the Depression, as maybe even paradise compared with owing $36 trillion and can't send any bonds to turn those debt bonds over.
This does feel different. It feels like a watershed moment in our nation. Carrie, is the current administration underestimating the long-term consequences of a bond market sell-off, particularly, Carrie, with $6 trillion in refinancing on the line?
I think our Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent knows exactly what's on the line. And I think that's part of who we saw step in to have this pivot yesterday that we saw. I think part of what Trump was doing is, as they say, the moving the line, the ZOPA, the zone of possible agreement in negotiating, also known as the Overton window. Trump was moving the Overton window as a putting a stake in the ground in order to start the conversation around having reciprocal tariffs, because for decades in the post-World War II era, the United States was incredibly generous to Europe, Japan, countries that were decimated by World War II, and they benefited from our largesse. And now Trump is saying, hey, we're doing a reset here. So yes, I agree with you. It is a watershed moment in many ways. And I would say in both directions, both in the sense that Trump moved that zone of discussion, and then the world responded. And so he responded.
Well, I think, Armstrong, I just want to note, he did not backtrack on China. He, in fact, increased the tariffs on China. The trade we have with China dwarfs, like the second, by a factor of 10 to 1. And China is the one that we need to give confidence to continue to invest in our treasuries, because they're the biggest purchaser. So it's a temporary, but only a modest pause.
Let me raise a fair question. Do you really think the president knows what he's doing?
I don't think the president or his advisors know what they're doing. These economists say if they had this magic wand, Armstrong, why wouldn't it be in a boom time all the year round? Why you just have particular times? Well, now we suddenly become blessed with great wisdom.
So what's guiding his hand?
I think what's guiding Trump's hand, I'm not exactly sure. Let me make this observation.
Carrie, I'm not sure either what guiding principle he's adhering to, pushing us in the direction that he is. Do you know? You have any idea? I tell you what, think about it, because I think it's a very important question. Because listen, inquiring minds want to know, and I must admit, I really want to know what's going on. Okay? Don't go away. I can't wait to hear Carrie's answer when we come back, because you want to know too. I don't know. Carrie, I admit, I play the market. And you and I both know that uncertainty is the death knell of investments. And I could play the market, and I could sort of figure out where things were going. Playing the market now, it's like going to Las Vegas. I've not seen this before. Maybe I've not lived long enough, but maybe you can help us out.
Well, I agree with you that certainty is the lifeblood of a stable market, absolutely. But to your question before the break on what is Trump's North Star or his guiding principle, I would say that is America first. That's been his guiding principle for decades now. Maybe folks have seen circulating on the internet, people pulled up an old clip of him with Oprah and on other programs too, talking about this trade issue for decades now. And so this has been on his mind for a long time, where he sees trade deals that are to the United States' disadvantage.
Then why did he blink?
Well, because there was a response. Let's not forget that 75 countries came and said, we will negotiate with you. We will lower our tariffs.
So you think that's why he responded? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, come on. Okay, I'm going to let you have that one. I'm going to leave it alone. Go ahead.
Armstrong,
Go ahead.
look, I agree with you. The bond markets, I'm sure, had something to do with that. And my friend Charlie
Okay.
Gasparino at the New York Post, he has a great piece on that very topic. So yes, look, things can have a multifactorial impact. So
That gives him
yes,
a reality check.
yeah,
Yeah,
it can
okay.
be. It can be many reasons. It can be the bond market. It can be the interest rates. It can also be the fact that 75 countries came to the table and said, we're going to lower our tariffs. I mean, we saw this across the board.
Well,
from
here's the
Vietnam.
good news. Here's the good news. He did concede. Okay, let's give him credit there. Okay, you know, let me raise this because the Congress recently passed this week the No Rogue Rulings Act, which would prevent judges from issuing nationwide injunctions against the president's policies, a major hurdle that Trump and his administration has had to deal with for some time now. Now, many Democrats were quick to complain in the media, and every single Democrat in the House voted no against the bill. But here's the thing. On the merits, this is an issue. Whenever the Trump administration, let's just say any presidential administration for that matter, let's just not exclude the Democrats out of this. When they take some action, groups will engage in what is called forum shopping. That's what it is, forum shopping, in order to find a district court judge who they believe will rule favorably and against the presidential administration. But the problem is, you're going to let one case upend everything else because that person is making the case? The constitutionality of a president's action should be decided as applied to an individual person or persons who bring the case. Some districts, Bruce, court, judges somewhere in the United States should not have the ability to completely invalidate a federal law when just one plaintiff comes to the court before them.
Well, I think there are arguments on both sides. On the one hand, the Republicans were very successful in getting nationwide injunctions challenging many of the Joe Biden's executive orders on student loans is one example, some of the decisions on abortion and otherwise. It's true, there's forum shopping all the time.
Yes.
And the fact is, at least one check on this authority to issue a nationwide injunction is issue a stay order. You postpone the implementation until it goes up to the Court of Appeals and up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And the U.S. Supreme Court itself, under existing law, has been doubtful about the legality of these nationwide injunctions. It hasn't issued a definitive ruling. On the other hand, in favor of that is that it's a little bit unstabling when you have a federal law applied one place, one jurisdiction, and then different in different jurisdictions. But I don't think it's overall a momentous decision because, as recent times show, the U.S. Supreme Court and appellate courts are quite willing and able to stay decisions they think are too momentous to be left for a single federal judge. I think it's one of the lesser problems we confront today.
Carrie, Trump has set up a trade showdown in his pivot with China. Does that scare you? This bloody trade war between China and America?
Well, as a Christian, I try not to live with the spirit of fear because I know where that comes
Concern.
from.
Let's say concern. Okay. Sorry, concern you.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, obviously, I mean, we have permanent concerns and permanent interests, and certainly as a massively powerful economy, China is a force to be reckoned with. I think in many respects, though, I'd rather see diversification of our supply chain away from China. I'd rather see if one of the results of this is to see more of our imports coming from other places like Vietnam or Philippines or India or elsewhere, I would be completely fine with that because not only would it diversify, which would give us a broader range of suppliers, it would also take it away from the CCP, which is a nefarious organization that's running
But
China.
does China economy need us more than we need China's products?
Well, like I said, I think there are enough substitution effects, as they say in economics, where you can get a similar product at a similar price from other countries. But they're going to have to step up to the plate themselves, too, and build that infrastructure to create the products that Americans would want to purchase. I do think I want to point out, though, also that Trump has said that from a national security standpoint, there are certain industries that we cannot outsource any longer to the CCP. For example, in COVID, it exposed our medical supply chain. The fact that we have to be begging China for face masks and some basic medical components, poses a national security risk, arguably.
Well, let me ask you this. Since you raised that, it's a brilliant point you just raised, by the way. Does TikTok pose a national security risk?
I think it was wise of Congress to put that in from the sense of what it does. I think it's a form of psychological warfare on America, because when you look at the equivalent in China of TikTok, there are severe controls that they don't have. For example, the children of China are only allowed to watch TikTok for a certain finite period, and they're only allowed to watch content that is much more positive, much more educational, and does not have these dark, just nefarious undertones like encouraging suicide, encouraging violence, encouraging self-destructive behavior, encouraging...
Hey, Carrie, we agree, but wait, the Supreme Court has ruled on it? Congress has ruled on it? Trump's extending this for another 75 days. Why?
Well, I think he said he wants it to be a strong deal. I think the
What's a strong deal, Carrie? Today I'm in a classroom because I actually thought I understood Trump. I did. But guess what? I think I'm wrong. So help me understand. What is you heard that? Yeah, she said a strong deal. No, Bruce. Let's let Carrie tell us, what's a strong deal?
Well, the phrase that was used to describe the current options on the table were half-baked, I think was the phrase. And so a strong deal is one that's not half-baked, that's fully baked. And it is, I think that the sticking point is what to do with the algorithm and whether that should be allowed to remain under Chinese control. I don't think it should, because the algorithm is the lifeblood of what is creating the psychological operational warfare. I think it should be put in American control hands. That's why I personally am not on TikTok until it is taken out of the control of the CCP. I don't want the CCP on my cell phone, Armstrong. And in terms of understanding Trump, the operating system of Trump, I think at this point, the only constant that we should all agree on, the only constant for Trump is chaos. Or not,
wow. From the mouth of conservatives, chaos.
No.
Bruce.
Well, number one.
Not chaos.
You said chaos. Oh, you said it right. No. Oh, don't take it back. You said it right. Go ahead, Bruce.
Well, a couple of observations. First, about the trade. I want to underscore we export as well as import. And examining only the import side, I think, gives you a warped view of what the consequences are. American farmers are going to be destroyed. You cut off China as a market.
Yeah.
So you're going to curtail a whole lot of American first who get America first by selling other products. But going back to TikTok, number one, the statute gave a grace period to try to find a buyer. Mr. Trump did not go back to Congress and seek an extension. He just said, well, I think I'll defer implementation 75 days, another 70. He could give him 75 years. That's one thing that's problematic. The other thing that I find about the statute is it's very paternalistic. 170 million Americans were using TikTok, right? We trust their judgment. They can decide. They're not all 5-year-olds. You can put in limits as to age, if you appropriate, to get into TikTok. But we trust the American people to have enough brain power to discern what's propaganda and what's not. When we try to dwarf them and shrink their brains and suggest you're too stupid to know this is Chinese propaganda.
Bruce, children?
Excuse me?
What about children?
No, those are children. That's appropriate. But this cut off TikTok to everybody. The 170 million users were not.
So are you making an argument now for TikTok?
I'm making an argument for the American people when they're adults to be able to make up their own choices.
Which makes an argument for TikTok.
Make an argument like anything. I make an argument for anything else as well.
All I can tell you,
yeah?
Nothing makes sense today. All I can tell you, Bruce, Carrie, no, does anything make sense in the world anymore? It seems like what happens in a week, it's a year. The end of this week has felt like 365 days to me. But anyhow, I want to talk about, when we come back, the fact that John Thune, the Senate Majority Leader, and Mike Johnson, the Speaker of the House, tried to get Trump's beautiful budget passed. But guess what? The hardline conservatives will say, no way. Why are the hardliners against this budget? We'll find out when we come back. Don't go away.
It is easier to build up strong children than to try and repair broken men.
The streets are plagued with crime, violence. There's a lot of poverty, and it's all a result of lack of education that's happening in our schools. So it really is a crisis.
We come from very different political perspectives, but we've come to the same conclusion, and that is there is a crisis in the classroom. Children are being deprived of quality of life because they're being deprived of a good education. We must solve this problem. It's incumbent upon all of us to join hands together to get this done.
We can't afford to wait one more day before we address these issues, because every day we lose another child.
Let's stop the politicking. Let's stop the games. Let's really do something to give these kids a real chance at life and being a part of that American dream.
We need accountability for funding. Many of the districts where you're seeing very low test scores, students graduating with very low literacy and math comprehension rates, they are receiving a lot of funding. So where is the money going where our kids aren't being adequately educated?
If you believe every child is deserving of a quality education, please go to educationjusticefoundation.com. You know, Carrie, real conservatives want commitments to real deeper physical cuts in the budget because they actually think that we're going to go off the financial cliff with these trillions of dollars in deficit. And it seems like Republicans want to spend like Democrats. And Thune and Mike Johnson is ushering it forward. But what about our fiscal responsibility in the deficit? Carrie?
Well, in the bill that Mike Johnson put forward, it's $880 billion in cuts. I mean, that's significant. So I think it's important to note in this bill they've been debating and the House just passed, even while we've been talking, there's a difference between a floor and a ceiling. And the floor is where you start the conversation. And they couldn't agree on the same floor to start from. But now that they're on the same page, and so now when you have a floor, then you build up on that in terms of getting more cuts beyond that. And so to any Republican who votes against not only the cuts, but also the tax reform, I think this is damaging to the Republican brand. It's damaging to the ideals of freedom and limited government and personal responsibility. And so I think it's good that we're seeing Congress take some action on this. I think that they are committed to the cuts, and DOGE is part of that. And I want to just add to one thing I said in the last segment, that I think the phrase I should have used is strategic ambiguity with Trump, because when you're talking about our adversaries, it's good to keep them on their toes, and that's what he's doing.
Let me raise this. You can tell I'm in a very contemplative state this weekend. You know, Trump's decision to use tax records submitted by illegal immigrants has caused IRS officials, plural, to resign and protest. Bruce and Carrie. Now look, some people will argue, and I'm sure, Carrie, you may argue this, that the ICE needs every bit of information it can get to track down and deport illegal immigrants living in this country. They are, I remind you, of course, millions that came in under the Biden administration that people feel need to be tracked down and face the music. But Carrie, I'm gonna start with Bruce. The last time I checked, and I believe in the rule of the law, even though I may not always like how these judges rule about Biden's deportation, about Trump's deportation, all that, there are three branches of government. And I must tell you, our founders favored the legislative branch above all the others, Bruce.
For sure.
Not the judicial, not the executive, but the legislative branch. I have two civics. And my civics has not changed, Carrie. But let me just tell you, I always thought, though, that federal law protects taxpayer information and disclosure to other government agencies. So I thought that may be a bit of a hiccup in Trump's plan. And the irony in all of this is that illegal immigrants that would be discovered as a result of the use of our IRS information would be illegal immigrants that are paying taxes. Okay? And of course, most illegal immigrants, Carrie, because not all, they do pay their taxes. And it is estimated that illegal immigrants account for approximately $10 billion in federal, state, and local taxes, not including sales tax, which the left loves to mislead us, adding to their calculation. Yet, it is still estimated that around 50% of illegal immigrant households, Bruce, they pay their taxes.
Yeah, and they get special IRS numbers to pay the taxes. Listen, I think that a couple observations. One, the reasons why the resignations, because the law seems clearly to prohibit sharing this information with another agency, absent some clear probable cause to believe a crime is occurring. They're not crime, they're paying taxes. The other ramification is, if this happens, then the illegals aren't going to pay taxes. They wait a minute, I can't trust this anymore.
They're going dark.
Yeah, they're going to go dark.
Yes,
right.
fact.
And then it's going to cause an increase in the budget deficit.
Yeah,
so that's just how this is going to pan out. And when it goes back again to the fact that Congress is AWOL, if the president thinks he needs this information, it's more important to deport the illegal immigrants and get their tax money and diminish the budget deficit, then he needs to ask Congress to change the law. He can't just do it unilaterally and say, I won an election against illegal immigrants and I can ignore the law. That's not how the process works.
Well, let me ask my Christian sister, Carrie, because she and I share the same faith. What is your perspective on all this?
As a Christian?
No, I say my sister, I'm just having a little fun. Because I have a little compassion here. People don't always think I have compassion, but I do, I care, because people are suffering. People's way of life is just all of a sudden in, and we say this is the trust that we have, and all of a sudden we unilaterally change it, and all of a sudden now the IRS is sharing information with federal officials. There's a way to do things, Carrie. People go bonkers. When they already see what he's doing, scares them to death. They'll go dark, they'll isolate, and will not submit any kind of information or pay any taxes.
Well, it's interesting. Like, I was in Italy a couple years ago, and I was being forced to take the COVID vaccine, the booster shot, in order to enter a cruise boat that I was boarding. And I didn't want to take it because I thought I had natural immunity, but they were trying to force me to take it. The problem is there was nowhere to take it. All of the sites were shut down. In fact, I had a hospital tell me COVID's over. This was in summer of 22. And I was like, I know it's over, but your government's not letting me board a cruise boat unless I get a shot. So I literally had to go to, there was one site in all of Rome that was for illegal immigrants and homeless people to get the vaccine booster. And it was either that or don't go on the cruise boat. And the only reason I mention this is to say how strictly controlled the access to the vaccine was for non-citizens. And every other country is basically that way. And so I think it's so unique that this idea that if a country wants to have sovereignty, to have borders, to have order and rule of law, that somehow it's nationalistic and evil and nefarious, even though every other country does this. And so the fact that we've normalized giving special codes to people who are breaking crimes by being here, I'm not so, I find that hard to believe that this is something that should have been normalized to begin with. And so I think that's part of why Trump came to office, was the people voted for him to do that, was to disrupt people being asleep at the wheel. This, as they say, the subconscious programming where things are on default. They shouldn't be on default. And look, just as a side note, as a Christian, I do want to point out, sometimes people like to say baby Jesus was brought to Egypt as an infant. Well, first of all, Egypt had no social welfare programs for illegal immigrants. And then second of all, technically, Egypt was actually part of the Roman Empire. So it was actually part of the same empire. So he was not actually going to another sovereign nation.
But do you know why we have Passover and why so many Jews around the world celebrate Seder? It's because the Jews left Egypt. And where did they go? Where did they end up? Israel, in the holy city. And that's why it's such a sacred and important time, because they were freed from bondage. And I will remind you of this as we enter our Passover weekend, as we celebrate the most important Christian holiday on the calendar, the resurrection of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And compassion matters, because by the grace of God, it goes us. None of us never know what we're coming to in life. And until we walk in somebody else's shoes, I'm always very cautious about my judgment. But Carrie, my sister, Bruce, my brother, I'm going to say goodbye. I appreciate this conversation so much. Because when we return, we got to talk a little about crypto. There's a lot to talk about when it comes to crypto. And we'll be back.
As a home buyer, you need a lender who cares about your home ownership dreams. United Security Financial has been helping families secure their dream homes for 30 years. We're a national fair practice lender that provides affordable mortgages and low down payment programs to eligible home buyers. To learn how United Security Financial can help you secure your dream home, call 1-800-373-4186.
Gregory Johnson, welcome back to the broadcast. I'm President Eternal Custody. And Gven Sariol, are you in Panama today?
I am, yes, sir.
We're about to take over Panama, brother.
Looks like it. Looks like it.
So what is the current state of cryptocurrency regulation in this country? And it seems so confusing and unclear, the legal framework for crypto companies that exist today.
Well, you know, it's a lot less confusing than it was 6 months ago or even 3 months ago, Armstrong. I think that what we've seen in this administration is sweeping change. What we've seen in this administration is a buffet table, a wish list that every single thing the crypto industry ever could have wanted, they've now received. And I think one of the challenges is when you get more than you even thought you were going to get, how do you decide where to go first? I think we have the table set, if we don't blow it, to make the United States indeed the crypto capital of the world. And that starts with regulation. And even tomorrow, some of the things that the SEC has been doing to improve regulation with the crypto roundtables, the so-called spring sprint I'll be attending tomorrow over at Union Station, is a sign of positive change in the crypto regulation markets here in the U.S.
So, Gven, how is the SEC's aggressive stand against platforms like Coinbase and Ripple impacting innovation in the crypto space?
Well, I mean, it no longer is. This new SEC that is now being run by Paul Atkins has basically dropped all of these civil suits. I mean, there was suits against OpenSea, which is the largest NFT seller or decentralized exchange in the world, Uniswap, Consensus, which builds all the stuff for Ethereum. It's all being dropped. So I think that there's a very pro-crypto SEC now, And they're moving from, regulation by enforcement to actually extending an olive leaf out to the crypto community to see what they can do to help foster innovation and growth. And I think it's necessary because, crypto is one of the sectors that has the potential for massive growth. And I think that the U.S. needs a lot of sectors like this right now in order to avoid, plunging into a deep recession. So I think that there's some very positive things coming up with the SEC that I think is way different than the prior administration that was led, and the SEC that was led by Gary Gensler.
Well, Gregory, are regulators protecting investors? Or are they just stifling innovation by treating crypto more like a threat than an opportunity?
For the last year, we've been discussing this with that framework in mind, Armstrong. And again, to build off this theme, everything changed with this presidential election. I think the new challenge we're going to face is the industry has everything it wants. Now, what do you do with it? And my biggest concern is there's no question that the U.S. is emerging now as that crypto capital of the world. The question is, will we make legitimate deals on both sides of the aisle in this city of D.C., and will we actually make crypto regulations that stand? At Etana, we've always been deeply focused on doing things the right way, in a balanced way, in a measured way. And I have to say, right now, the thing that concerns me the most, and you've been hearing this as well, the conflict of interest. Those things are starting to come to the top of the surface. If we're not careful, we're going to blow this moment as an industry, in my view.
Gven, it seems like our president is the biggest cheerleader of this crypto move and making the United States the place for crypto. But that also comes with its own challenges. And while you think this may be your days of glory, people who look at the president and his administration, who seems to be fully on board, it's also an opportunity for people to be exploited and lose their life fortunes.
100%. And, this is one of the things that I think the crypto community frowned upon when it came to President Trump. Him launching a meme coin a couple of days before taking office, and then the subsequent day, his wife launching a meme coin. I think that was silly. I think that was a total conflict of interest. So, and by the way, while, we have probably the most pro crypto environment that we've ever had, it really hasn't affected price. In fact, the crypto markets have gone down, and by comparison of the Biden administration, where cryptos, for the most part, went up. We had a bad year in 2022, but since 2023, Bitcoin and a few select cryptos have really done well during that time. But I think that there is lots of potential conflict of interest going forward. Hopefully, we had this thing with Malay, with the Libra coin, where he came out and promoted this Libra coin, and if he received money or not, I don't know. We don't know about that yet. But these elected officials really need to make sure that they remove themselves from these potential landmines, because to be launching meme coins with your name and you stand to benefit from it, it's just no good, and it leaves a bad taste in everybody's mouth. But if we can really do right by getting some sensible regulations in here and really be focusing on protecting the investor and getting this, I really think they should do away with meme coins personally, but really moving away from this gamble culture and getting into what it is that crypto really is beneficial, which is moving the velocity of money at a faster pace. That's what we want. These old antiquated systems aren't working, and crypto has the propensity to really lift us into a new era of finance.
So Gregory, how do you advise someone who's about to enter the Shark Tank of crypto with little protection? What should people do? Because people get excited about making money.
They do.
I saw recently where someone spent $10,000 on contracts and the return was $17 million. That's like somebody winning the lottery $1 billion once in a lifetime.
I know.
That rarely happens to people. When people see that, they believe it can happen to them because they feel their way of life is being lost financially, and they're desperate to do something. And with all this hype about crypto, what advice would you give the average person here?
Be rational, rational exuberance, to borrow from our old friend Alan Greenspan, Armstrong. People need to treat this like they would any other alternative asset class in their portfolio. So whether you have an advisor or whether or not you're on your own, you need to take it easy to get in, be balanced, and allocate it that way. You certainly don't put all of your eggs in one basket. And I think Gven brought up a really good point, talking about the impact of these politicians influencing the behavior of many investors who think it's okay to do what you're suggesting, which is they get over their skis and get into trouble. And that doesn't do anybody any good. Let's not forget, this is the same industry that we're all supportive of, at least myself. I'm very supportive. Gven, we're supportive of right crypto. At the end of the day, the industry showed a willingness to shoot itself in the foot over and over again, like they were following the instructions on a shampoo bottle. Wash, rinse, repeat. So we need to avoid that.
So Gven, can our country realistically become the global leader in blockchain and crypto innovation? Or is it already falling behind?
Yeah, I mean, it's headed towards that. And, you know, whether anybody likes it or not, the U.S. holds all the cards in finance right now. You know, until there's another, you know, major financial hub in the world that, you know, and we've got some pockets, Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, but nothing like the United States. And the United States is the largest users or speculators, I should say, in crypto. So in order for the world to get what it wants in terms of the crypto going up and to the right and having its day in the sun, the U.S. has to come along with it. And I think that it's headed there. We've just had some crazy price action. There's things regarding tariffs and Panama canals and Greenland and, you know, just so many wild things that are potential black swans. And so crypto really hasn't seen its real bull market yet. But I think the U.S. is headed in the right direction. And, you know, the Democrats, I think that they're going to see this next time around, especially during midterms, that they better get on board with crypto. Otherwise, they're going to be completely left behind, because it is very profitable and it's very beneficial to the people for the future of finance, in my opinion.
So, Gregory, how are countries like China and members of the EU positioning themselves with the central bank digital currency and crypto-friendly frameworks?
Sure. You know, listen, China, you know, publicly has banned crypto, but we all know behind the scenes they've been mining, supporting, and advocating quietly through Hong Kong and other places of influence for some time. Look, the United States on one topic, which is CBDC, you mentioned, Armstrong, we're terribly behind. And we as Americans are very fortunate that we get to look at issues entirely through an American lens that other nations aren't as fortunate. You know, the Europeans and many, many other nation states, they already have functional CBDCs. Here we get concerned about issues of libertarian ideas around privacy, yet the privacy we give up on our mobile phones vastly exceeds what is the true capability of the government to surveil. So we're very behind on exploring how do we modernize the dollar to compete. Now, there's one thing I have to say. The most important issue, in my view, that has to do with the crypto industry is and normalizing the industry. The only way we become that crypto capital in the world is we need to make it normal. We stop using the word crypto when we have these conversations and just talk about it being normalized, is the debate that's going on the Hill this year around stablecoins. Stablecoins kill several birds with the same stone. It's one of the biggest issues in the world in terms of global finance. It's one of the most important use cases. It's arguably the killer app for tokenization. And right now, there are separate pieces of legislation on both sides that are looking to advance and put the rules in place. As you might surprise, there's differences of opinion. But one of the casualties to this conflict of interest that we were both discussing earlier is that you had Democrats supporting these legislative initiatives, but all this conflict of interest has gotten people saying, how can we support this We're in these blatant issues that we're seeing with World Liberty Financial and so forth. So this plot is going to continue to thicken, and hopefully it works out so that we can have leadership both in terms of our dollar through stable coins, which are backed up by the US dollar and treasuries. This is probably the most important issue du jour that we're going to be facing to make crypto the capital of the world, the United States.
Gavin, what else concerns and encourages you in this emerging space?
You know, for me, it's going back to what you were saying and what Gregory is saying in regards to CBDCs. For me, it's having a totalitarian government being able to basically cut you off from your funds because you said something bad about, you know, your opposing party or whatever. And we've seen that in the banking systems. But if you now have the government have a direct link to you, I think that's one of the most concerning things to me. So going back to what Gregory was saying in regards to stablecoin legislation, I think that this is one of the things that's going to propel proper regulation and also help us to get rid of a lot of we're not going to be able to completely get rid of it, but a lot of the scams, a lot of the BS out there that is just really, really holding down crypto from bringing its true potential out, which is transfer of payment, moving the velocity of money, and decentralizing the money so that these central banks can't play it like a piano. I think that's some of the things that to me is the most important thing, but others may see it differently. Others may trust the government that they're never going to do that to them. But we've just seen, like with Canada a few years ago, where, you know, there were friendly protesters, no violence going on. The government determined them as terrorists, and therefore blocked all the bank accounts of the people that were protesting, plus all the people that contributed to them. So that to me is the worst case scenario. But I think we've got some good stuff in the pipeline that we should avoid that hopefully here in the near future.
Your final thoughts?
Let's get this right. This is an unprecedented moment in the history of financial services, both for the United States and for the world. We need to have common sense regulation. We need to get stable coins right, and we need to do our best to mitigate this climate of conflict of interest before it overshadows all of the potential benefits that has everybody excited about digital assets.
Your final word, Gavin? 30 seconds?
Yeah. I'm right there, and I would say this because, you know, when you're moving a huge ship like the United States, it's not like a small country like Dubai where, you know, you really don't have a democracy there, and they're able to just whip up legislation. It's going to take a little bit of time. The good news is that we do have, you know, basically one party in all three positions of power in the United States, so things should move a lot quicker. But in order for us to do this right, I agree with Gregory, we've got to come up with sensible regulation, and it's got to be well thought out. But I think that we've got a little bit of time now, and I think it's headed in the right direction.
Gavin, Greg, Bruce Fein, Carrie Sheffield, thank you so much for joining us.
Always a pleasure.
Enjoy your weekend.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you.